How are you liking your adjustment living in New York now?
It's been great. I've been on the East Coast before, so to be back on the other side of the river is kind of cool.
You grew up in Oakland, right?
Yes.
I remember reading back in the day that you and Gary Payton and Steve Nash all trained together in the summers.
We did. Gary was a little bit older, so we learned from him, and so we had a lot of great workouts together. And Nash has become one of the best, if not the best, point guard in the league. So we had some great battles then.
Uh, you must have played in Canada quite a few times, Vancouver, Toronto over the years. What are your thoughts of the game here?
I thought it was great. You know, you talk about Montreal, you talk Canada, you talk about hockey, but they've embraced basketball, and it was a great turnout tonight.
Speaking of Montreal, have you had any time to adjust to the culture, kind of see the sights and see the world, or it's just more in and out because
It's just been in and out. I have family that lives here, so hopefully I'll be back in the summer to check out some of the races and the Jazz Fest.
that's a better time to win.
I know, yes, just a little bit.
Really appreciate it, Jason.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was our interview with Jason Kidd, and that was a lot of fun. Really nice guy.
You know what? Been a fan forever. I put a photo up on our Facebook page. I have a 1994 autograph of Jason Kidd from when he was at Cal, and he's been playing the game forever. I'll just tell you a quick story to get started. Buddy of mine grew up in lived in the Bay Area in the late 80s when Jason was playing high school ball there, and they just said he was a freak of nature. He had the body of an NBA player when he was like 16, 17, kind of like LeBron James, and was just like blowing everyone away on the court. Years older than him, he was just like he was already ready. They knew he was going to be an NBA guy. He's been doing it for 19 seasons, and so to hang up the shoes, to meet this guy, such a class act, and what an amazing career. Maybe top 5 point guard all time.
I think you definitely have to put him in that category. Kind of interesting, he came in and leaving with Grant Hill. They're kind of in the same, they won co-rookie of the year together. And he kind of redefined the position. I mean, it was interesting because he was never a great shooter until the latter years of his career. But always, I mean, the thing that always stuck out for me was his rebounding numbers. For years, he'd get like 7, 8 rebounds a game from the point guard position. That's huge. His defensive skills at 6'4", and having the mature body, being strong, able to D up not only ones but twos, having a strong assist numbers, strong steal numbers, and he just got everyone involved. I mean, we remember all those years he brought the New Jersey Nets with Kenyon Martin and Richard Jefferson to the finals. And let's be honest, those teams weren't amazing teams. These were teams that were led by Jason Kidd. I mean, it's kind of comparable to how Chris Paul took the Hornets a few years back with Tyson Chandler pretty far. But Jason Kidd, I mean, Team USA, doing a lot. I mean, he's just, the longevity of his career. When you talk about all-around point guards, I think it's safe to say top 5. I mean, he's going to be in those conversations. You're going to have your John Stockton, you're going to have your Magic Johnsons, and maybe Chris Paul by the time this is all done, and Steve Nash having 2 MVPs. Do you think the fact that maybe he didn't, have larger scoring numbers is going to be held against them? Because he's always been kind of that 14, 15-point guy, even in his prime.
No, I mean, he does so much more on the court beyond scoring, and what he does off the court. Like they said this year with the Knicks, he basically was the Zen guy in the locker room and just set the tone completely for what they do, and he's always been that way. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, absolutely. I've been thinking about top 5 point guards, and absolutely, like you mentioned, Magic and Stockton. I would throw Bob Cousy in there from the Celtics back in the day, Isaiah Thomas, and 5, 6, it's going to be Jason Kidd, and a guy who's, you mentioned Grant Hill, but I think he's very much always going to be tied in with Steve Nash, as mentioned in the interview. Steve Nash was playing college ball in Santa Clara, very close to Oakland, so they played along with Gary Payton. They played ball forever in the summers together. And so when they first came to the league, Steve and Jason were both in Phoenix, and Jason was a star right away. Steve, not so much. He was a bench warmer. He was the 3rd point guard on that team. And to see Steve go off to Dallas on his own, they were always very close friends, and they remain close friends to this day. And it says, as Jason mentioned, head-to-head, those are 2 of the most amazing point guards of all time. And see them play together all these years is absolutely amazing. And like I said, amazing point guards, amazing guys, and to see him hang up the shoes now is bittersweet, but what an amazing career.
Well, I mean, I think one has to say, because most of these young coaches that come in the league, they tend to be point guards, right?
Right.
We've seen Mark Jackson make the leap. Do you think Jason Kidd's one of those guys who's going to want to take the jump into that role, and do you think he would be successful?
I've heard a bit of mentions of that the last few days, and I say absolutely. I think he has the perfect making for a coach. He's so great. I mean, I heard that when he was when they had the preseason Raptors Knicks game, that he walked over to Sam Casey, the Raptors coach, and said, "How are the kids?" He's just that type of guy. He knows everybody, knows how to be a leader off the court, and I could see him being coach for a long, long time actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I think he's one of those guys who's going to go down a little bit undervalued, I feel, because he doesn't necessarily, never had the hops to get you your Derrick Rose type dunks, and he never had the 3-point shot to really give you that kind of Kyrie Irving or Steph Curry kind of bomb effect. I think he was just one of those ridiculously efficient all-around players. Like, when you look at his game, he brought you overall more than most point guards could. I mean, his scoring numbers not being high were a bit indicative of the emphasis he put on getting other people involved. And I just think that he's one of those guys that he's going to go down. First ballot, I think, is kind of guaranteed, if not second. I don't see how you say no to him. I mean, him, and it's kind of interesting because when you think of that draft, he came in with Grant Hill, #1 pick. Do you remember #1 pick in that year? Big dog, Glenn Robinson.
Oh, man.
Big dog. And so he went #1. He played all right in Milwaukee.
Good
He's a bit of a scorer, but he's not the same player. I mean, Grant Hill, his first couple years in Detroit, and Jason Kidd, his years in, I would have to say New Jersey were his best years.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had some fun Sun years, but all in all, Jason Kidd, to me, he emphasizes everything I want in a point guard. I don't want a small point guard. I don't want a point guard who I worry about having the ball in his hands. We were watching George Hill bringing the ball up for the Indiana Pacers and just, turnover and turnover. And when it comes down to it, you need a guy who can take care of the ball. Now, when it comes to coaching, I think he does have the IQ. I don't know if he's a loud guy, though. And I think as a coach, you kind of need to be a little bit louder. Like, I think Mark Jackson is that boisterous guy. He does have the big voice. I just wonder if that would be something that would hold him back. Although you see guys like Brian Shaw, who doesn't necessarily have the biggest voice, getting his name out there.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned before about evolution, he didn't have a shot coming into the league. He developed that. I think he can develop his voice.
He's an incredibly cerebral player.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, his basketball IQ is off the charts, and so he'll do it his own way, like he's always been. And I don't see this being a problem for him at all. I had to mention a couple of things. He won the ring with Dallas. We didn't mention that.
No,
so he finally did get that towards the end of his career. And in Olympic play, he was undefeated. I think he's maybe one of the only guys in world history to just never lose an Olympic game. So,
no, well, he's definitely a winner. He's brought W's to every city he's been to. But I mean, it's gonna be sad to see him go, because even in the latter years, finishing up with the Knicks there. Actually, I always found it was interesting that the Knicks brought in Jason Kidd and Tyson Chandler, which are the two pieces who brought a lot of value to that Dallas Maverick team.
I don't think Dirk would have liked that, but that's how it worked out.
Yeah, but I think I think he would have been happier if the Knicks had gone out maybe a little bit deeper of a playoff run, but that's how the cards fell. And speaking of playoffs, we do have quite the series going on right now. So NBA Finals, we have the Spurs versus, which are supposed to be the championship Miami Heat. Spurs taking game 1. Now, to be fair, Miami was leading, and in the first half you were watching the game, you thought Miami had them good.
Yeah, right off the bat, there was a crazy dunk to kind of set the tone for the game, but it was Apollo Creed versus Rocky out there. Back and forth. I love that game.
It was back and forth, but the one thing, and it's how the Spurs play their game. They never give up. They don't make mistakes, and they just chip away at you. They just came back. They didn't get phased, and I think that's a big deal when it comes to the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat are that team with all their big blocks and dunks and steals. They kind of scare you a bit. They put you a bit worried about what you're doing. And when you're a heady team like the Spurs under Greg Popovich, who by the way, was doing a fantastic job keeping his guys under wraps. And when you looked at the box score, the scoring was just spread out. Tim Duncan had a great game. Leonard had a good game. And, his defense on LeBron James.
Yeah. I believe LeBron was 2 for 8 with Leonard on him. So.
Hey, he was fantastic. And what they did the whole game was put Leonard on him, but they always made sure that Timmy Duncan or one of their big guys was right there. So if he burnt by him, they just didn't let LeBron James do what he needed to do because they figured, you know what? Which is what I always think teams should do against the Miami Heat. Make those other guys beat you. Because, yes, he's a good passer, but make them make the shot. Make it happen.
Yeah, it's weird that you mentioned that because last night, not to go to hockey, but Jaromir Jagr was asked about the NBA Finals, and he said, make Birdman beat you. Put 2 guys on LeBron, and that's exactly what the Spurs are doing.
For sure.
So, yeah, I mean, to talk about this series, and you mentioned statistics, a friend of mine mentioned me after the game that this is ridiculous. Miami led that game in virtually every single statistic, but the Spurs still won. It just shows, and I have to say this, I caught this from a football guy a few years back. Statistics never tell the full story.
No.
They never tell us the full story. So much happens on the court that you can't put onto numbers. So, I mean, absolutely the tone was set beginning with that dunk. But like I said, the Spurs hung in there. They got the they got a big hit to the face, but they kept going. And Tony Parker, 20-odd points, 6 assists, and 0 turnovers. That's it.
Well, I think that was the story for that game. When I was speaking about Indiana versus Miami in past shows, I was saying how it's Indiana's turnovers are really hurting them. And that's one thing that San Antonio just doesn't do. They took care of the ball. And while they didn't have the greatest first half, I think they came out of this. And remember, they played in Miami, right? So game 1 in Miami, taken home. The Spurs are a great road team. Let's be honest about this. But if the Spurs, even if they lose game 2, go back to San Antonio, tied 1-1, they can come out of there potentially 3-1. That's a win. I mean, there's just and some of their players didn't even play super well.
No. I mean, that it just speaks how deep they are. And to me, I think the Spurs are a deeper team. They're a more well-coached team, as you mentioned before. The thing about Miami losing at home, I don't think it's a big issue. As my friend Max Harris mentioned, I think there have been 2 or 3 teams the last 15 years who have had home court and lost the first game. One of those was the Lakers versus the Sixers in, I believe, 2001. So it's happened before. It's not a major issue, but Miami's got to win game 2.
Miami has no choice.
They have to.
Miami definitely cannot go into San Antonio down 2-0. That's just not acceptable. Miami, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned how the stats don't always tell the story, and the one person that exemplifies that to me is Shane Battier. He's never had those statistics in his career, but the little intangibles, little tips, little picks, everything. And the Chargers or flops now that we're talking about the Heat. I mean, these finals in the Heat are going to be synonymous with flopping and how many fines they get. But I was pretty right with LeBron James doing well after finding those 2 straight games. When he gets fined off the court, he comes back and has a strong game. So it's almost to their benefit for him to be flopping. And let's be honest, even David Stern said, $5,000-$10,000 is not going to stop someone who's making $16 million a year. At
least he's honest about it.
Yeah, at least he's honest about it. Well, it's his last year. Yeah. Like he's not up for re-election at this point.
Good point.
But I just think that Shane Battier's come out off slow. I just think there's no execution. And honestly, I think the Spurs are going to start game 2 better. I think they know what they need to do. I think they just plod along. I think Miami really has to react to this because Miami's going to say, we beat them in every statistical category, like you said, and we lost.
Well, I mean, we have to talk about the shot. Tony Parker pulled a Harlem Globetrotter shot,
Was that
around.
A travel? Was that this off his knee? Now, I saw enough of the clips. He did get it off in time.
Yeah.
So
by a nanosecond, he got it off.
But still, right? And so he still got that. So was that traveling, but anything else? But even bar everything, you had LeBron James on you.
Yeah, he did.
Much bigger player. He has LeBron James, one of the best. He could have been Defensive Player of the Year this year. How does he not just get that block? Well, it's just showing you the talent of Tony Parker, and the trust that team has in him, and that's a brutal shot. He just cut in. It was a broken play, obviously. They didn't have that. There's no way that was their ideal shot. But I think they wanted to put him to the line, worst case, and they wanted to get him a good shot. I mean, that's Tony Parker's bread and butter, those little jumpers.
Yeah, I mean, I have to speak to that. I mean, the whole conversation this year was LeBron James as MVP, and I mentioned this a few weeks back. You have to put Tony Parker in that conversation because he's the best player on the best team. and he was second team All NBA, not first team All NBA. Chris Paul over him. I think there was a bit of fire in him, and you know what? He's been point guard on that team since he was 19 years old. He's 31.
He's old guard now.
Greg Popovich, when you're playing for that guy, he takes the best out of you. And I think Tony Parker played one of the best games of his life in Game 1, and it showed. And you know what? That half an inch made everything. It made the whole difference. And you know what? I think the Spurs are going to win this series. We haven't made our predictions yet. I said the other day, playing with this new application, the social media software called Vine. It's amazing. I'm picking Spurs in 6. I don't know who you got.
Yeah, I was going back and forth. At the first half of that game, I was actually thinking that Miami had this in a quick bit. But before that game started, I actually, weirdly enough, agreed with you with this one because I actually thought that the Spurs. It's interesting to me. If it's going to be 6, it's going to be Spurs. If it's going to be 7, I think it's going to be Heat. I don't think the Heat lose Game 7 at home.
Yeah.
So I think if the Spurs wrap this up now, they did what they needed to do and take at least one game in enemy territory, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to have Game 6 in their place and Game 3 and 4 at home.
Wait, so it's 2-3-2 in the finals. Remember that, though.
Oh, it's 2-3. Oh,
yeah,
sorry, I forgot about that.
It's weird.
So,
they change it up in the finals.
Exactly. So they take one. Well, that's. I mean, if they can take Game 2 and they have 3 straight, it's
Miami's
over.
got problems.
Yeah. So this is definitely a must-win for Miami Game 2. There's no question because if all San Antonio has to do is win 2 out of 3 at home.
Yeah. I got to mention something quickly. I lived in San Antonio the summer of 1999. I actually talked to Marcus Camby about this. The Knicks versus the Spurs. It was the lockout year, and this was the beginning, the absolute beginning of the Tim Duncan dynasty. And that city, they have no other sport. I mean, so the fans are absolutely amazing. And I'm going to tell you, when Miami goes there, they're going to feel the heat. I'm not kidding.
Miami's going to feel the heat.
Tim Duncan going for his 5th title. I just they got to win, like you said, Game 2 or else they are not getting it.
Well, there's one thing I was impressed with. You were saying with Tony Parker how Greg Popovich has the ability to bring the best out of players.
Yeah.
I think that really stems for Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. I think these two guys in different systems would have been either overlooked, underused. They're both in perfect positions, long, athletic, can play D, shoot the 3. They just set up the big 3, and let's be honest, Kawhi Leonard's kind of sneaking into the big 3 at a certain point.
Well, Manu's getting old.
Yeah, but the thing is, there's so much talent there, and we haven't even seen some of the bench players. They still have Tracy McGrady. Let's see, he could be a blast from the past. But I think if you're the Miami Heat and you ever see Tracy McGrady on the floor, it's kind of an insult because the game's over, right?
Yeah, and I got to mention this because you mentioned Tracy. There are so many Hall of Fame type guys in this series. I mean. And even if you go behind the scenes, I mean, Pat Riley, Alonzo Mourning.
Juwan Howard. No, I can't say Juwan Howard with a straight face.
I mean, but just like in Popovich, all these guys, and guys like Ray Allen, there is a pile of Hall of Fame type guys in this series. And it's something you don't see very often. So it's going to be a very interesting way for David Stern to go out because there's so much just elite.
Well, it's interesting because, David Stern has not been, I'll say, the biggest fan of San Antonio over the years. He's not a huge fan of small markets doing well. Let's be honest. It's a ratings game. It is a business, the NBA. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see the last year Stern has his tenure to have a small market win it. I just think it'd be funny because Miami exemplifies everything Stern wants. The big players, big dunks, big city, sexy city, everything. And then San Antonio, it's kind of like, as you said, David and Goliath kind of a conversation. I kind of hope San Antonio takes it. So to shore that one up, I think San Antonio takes it. You know what? I'm gonna stick to 6 because I don't think that they can win 3 straight against the Heat. I'm gonna stick to 6, even though this playoff format, which I don't like, by the way, I don't like 2-3-2 because I think it gives too much advantage to the road team. Because if you can win the first one, you have a chance to just clean it up at home.
Yeah,
I think. But the thing is, if they get past that Game 5, Miami has 2 straight games at home. It's tough. But jumping on to something that's tough, I mean, we were going over in our last show how the Raptors just got their new GM. They stole the reigning executive of the year from Denver. Hey, guess what? Denver's bleeding at the seams here. They're losing their coach of the year, George Karl. So George Karl actually wanted to stay, but then he's like, give me the money, and they're not sure where they're going, so they're like, bye-bye. A lot of rumors out there of maybe Lionel Hollins be filling a spot, maybe Maybe George Karl ends up in Grizzland. There's a lot of places. I've heard, kind of ups and downs. Like people who right away were like, oh, maybe he'll follow the trend to Toronto, but I don't think that happens. But we'll see. I think this whole group in Toronto is going to have a lot of surprises for us. They're really cleaning house at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But George Karl, let's not forget, still top 5 coach in the league. Are you comfortable with saying top 5?
Yeah, he could be a top 3, to be honest. I think it's ridiculous. We've been hearing from our friends in Denver over the past few weeks that there's been a lot of pressure cooker for him to get fired there. And I'm just like, how can you fire a guy when he brings a team to? I mean, okay, they got to the first round, but no stars. One of their best players is injured.
They were third in the West.
15 straight games won in the West. Best home court in the league.
And he won Coach of the Year. It's voted on by coaches and writers and a bunch of guys.
All what he did was so little.
He couldn't have done more.
That's
right?
coaching. I don't get it. Any team who has a smart person running their team is going to grab him right away.
I'm calling now. I think the Clippers look at him a lot.
I don't think I'll go to the Clippers because of Sterling, but
yeah, but Chris Paul, Blake Griffin's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Like, do you think he goes necessarily to a contender? And, the New Jersey Nets are looking for a coach. There's a lot of money there, a lot of interesting spots. But as you've said, I think George Karl definitely deserves that second shot. I think he'll find it real soon. I think he's got to be considered the top fish on the market right now.
Outside of Stan Van Gundy, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, Stan Van Gundy's been kind of up and down if he wants to coach again. Mm-hmm. And there's also Lionel Hollins which depends how you view him. Some would view him as just, riding his stars there in Memphis. Some would view him as a good defensive coach. I think he ends up, there's been talk that they actually switch. I mean, you can't actually trade coaches, but be talk that they switch. But I think George Karl,
what about OKC?
I would really like
Back
to say that.
To the Sonics.
I'm one of those people. Actually, it was funny because I was just thinking that if Seattle ever landed a team, that would be a great spot for him, right?
Phil Jackson was supposed to go there. So,
yeah. That would be funny because I honestly think that Scott Brooks, I hate to say it, but I think they need to change that.
I do too.
I think they have the talent. I just don't think they're getting it out of it. And look, if he's coming from a Western team used to young athletes who are run and gun system, It's not the worst transition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you're going to play your old team, but he goes from having a guy like Rashard Lewis,
That's true.
in there, like Kevin Durant. I think it'll go well. I think George Karl, given that elite level talent in Durant and Westbrook, can really make things work, and he's the kind of guy he'll command that respect.
Well, you have to remember in around 94, 95, when he was coach of the Sonics, he had a very young Sean Kemp and Gary Payton playing for them. So he knows how to coach young guys.
And he has a young Sean Kemp. Hey, who knows how that develops with Serge Ibaka, right?
Exactly.
Because if Serge Ibaka, I feel, can turn into that third scorer, he has the jump shot, he has the athletic ability. If he can get that, I think that's where they turn that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like Jeremy Lamb. As everyone knows, I'm a big OKC fan.
Yeah.
But I just think George Karl, them match made in heaven.
And to be honest, I think Denver was slowly coming apart at the seams without these two guys.
You lose your executive and your coach.
It's unbelievable.
Because this team is a land of misfit children, right?
Yeah.
And they were put together very well. And you had a coach who knew how to use them, and you had a GM who had a vision to use them. Now you just lost all that. I honestly think they have the possibility of really sliding in the standings next year.
Yeah,
because there's so many good teams that are left in the West that might make that jump.
Well, you got to throw in the Timberwolves. You got to forget that the entire team was injured this year.
Yeah.
They're going to be in the playoffs, so Denver's going to be having a tough spot getting into the playoffs next year. They got their legs cut off.
I think Minnesota's actually going to be a really good team going forward. I was actually watching an interview with Kevin Love on ESPN, basically saying how all the feud is way overblown. He's there. Him and Ricky Rubio are actually hosting.
They're
camps.
good friends. Yeah.
Private workowts with the team. They're really into this.
Yeah.
He actually had a little quote saying he might be willing to take a little less money for them to sign Nick Pekovic.
Okay, yeah.
There's big center there.
He's very under that team. Honestly, when they're healthy, dark horse, big time dark horse. Yeah.
And they've got a fairly high, I think a top 10 pick this year, which we'll go over obviously in our draft show going forward.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon. But So we've talked about George Karl. Now we want to give a little Canadian love. Andrew Wiggins, Team Canada. You want to tell them a bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, quickly, you know, if you don't know anything about Andrew Wiggins, all you have to know is that he's Canadian and he's the best 18-year-old basketball
Go
player.
to YouTube, Andrew Wiggins highlights.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins dunks.
Just
any of the above.
Best on the planet. That's all I can say. He's going to go to Kansas next year, and then he's going to be the consensus #1 in the NBA draft. Everyone says superstar, says the best of his generation. He did two really amazing things the last few days. First of all, he was going to prep school in the U.S., I believe in West Virginia. Wrote a really classy letter to the whole community there, thanking them for everything they did to him over the last couple of years, the way he's developed, you could tell, on the court and off the court. And then after that, agreeing to go back to Canada, go back to his roots, and he's going to be playing for the Canadian junior men's national team this coming week, actually, a thing, and they're going to have it in Toronto the next couple of weeks. So his commitment to his country and to the places he's played, it just speaks to how he's developed as a young man, and just great things coming from this guy from here forward. You know, you have the Olympics coming in a couple of years, so Canada basketball on the rise.
Yeah, no, definitely they're in a really good spot. I mean, speaking of young men, we have some more news. We talked about OKC, Kevin Durant getting into the world. I mean, I don't know if this is kind of a conflict of interest, because with Jay-Z owning the Brooklyn Nets,
I think if he may have to sell, it's only less than 1% he owns of the Nets because the Russians are. But he may have to sell that, or if he's just doing quote-unquote marketing for KD, he doesn't have to sell apparently.
And for those people who don't know, he's making an agency.
Yeah, sports agency. So he's going to be the first NBA player to sign with them. Obviously, KD is one of the best marketable, young faces in the league. But to change hands like that's very interesting, going to a new company. So we'll see what happens with that one. Very interesting.
Yeah, no. And speaking of new stuff, always make sure we have some really exciting stuff coming in weeks. We're going to be a little sealed lips about this for now, but always catch up with us, hoopslounge.com. We're gonna have some great info coming your way. Is there anything we want to end the show with before we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, check back Tuesday. We'll knock on wood. We're gonna have some very big news for you, just concerning basketball altogether. We'll leave it as a surprise, to be continued for you guys. But hoopslounge.com 24/7. We're on Twitter too.
Yeah. So as I said, Montreal Mark, Sporting Phil, so Marc Griffin, Phil Boileau, look us up, and on hoopslounge.com you can write to us, send us requests for future shows, and we're going to have lots and lots of stuff coming your way. So anything you want to see or know that we're putting out and you want to check it out, that's the spot to be.
See ya.
There.